Just going to call me this afternoon.
So good morning, everyone. It's, let me see, Tuesday the 9th of May. I sent out an invitation to join this call literally an hour or so ago, with the subject for today's call being, what does it really mean to be a professional? And I know each of us that are on the call today are aspiring to get results in our business that reflect those of a professional. I remember hearing a story with the former CEO of General Electric, who at the time, of course, was the head of the largest organization, business in America at the time. And he was speaking to some MBA graduates. They'd just finished their education, getting to the end of their time in university. And they had a chance for a Q&A with him. And one of the questions that came up was, in your experience, what could we do well in order to succeed in business? And he turned to the audience, and keep in mind, these are people that have studied business full-time for 4 years straight. They've got their bachelor's degree, they've gone on to do a master's. These are people that are pretty devoted to being in business. He said, simple, it's 2 words, don't dabble. That's interesting, that, isn't it? Don't dabble. I wonder how many of us, as we look at our business building activities, or perhaps those in our organizations, how many in our teams are dabbling and then wondering why they're not getting the results that they seek. It seems to me if we want to get the best results, we certainly can't afford to dabble. So I want to share, again, just a quick story here from a man that I heard speak a number of years ago, who was being asked a number of questions. He was a qualified and very, very successful heart surgeon. And he was meeting with a number of young people about their own educational pursuits, their own interests and careers, and how they want to move forward. And he said, some of these young folk, he said, used to ask me how long it took to become a doctor of medicine. The general pattern, he said, would be 4 years at a university, followed by 4 years in medical school. He said, and of course, if you want to be a specialist, that could take another 5 years or more, depending on your desire. He said that occasionally invoked a reaction. That adds up to 13 years, maybe even more. That's far too long for me. And he said, and I loved his response. He said, well, that all depends. He said, preparation for your career is not too long if you know what you want to do with your life. He said, how old will you be 13 years from now if you don't pursue your education? Just as old as you would be whether or not you chose it. The point is, time continues to move forward. So many times we get put off, don't we, at the thought of the hours required to succeed, the amount we need to learn, the time required to invest in order to become successful in a particular endeavor. But the reality is, whether we spend that time or not in our cause, time continues to move forward. 13 years may pass and someone could become a heart specialist. 13 years could pass and the person could not be, and he could have a regular job in a regular store in a regular town doing something very different. For both people, the same amount of time has passed. So I want to ask you, what are you doing with your time to make your business really count? So Michelle has just said, Susan Carver calls this delayed gratification. It really is, isn't it? The word sacrifice means to put off something good now for something better later. That's interesting, isn't it? Put off something good now in order to achieve something better later. Dave Johnson's just popping up here saying the biggest difference the biggest difference between successful and unsuccessful people is the way in which they use their time. That's interesting, isn't it? I want to touch on that a little bit later on, because I've often been asked, how do I use my time? People see that I've got 7 kids. They see that I've got a busy career. Of course, I've been busy with Nikan for many years. I've traveled to close to 30 countries over the last 5 years alone. I did a degree in my spare time while I was traveling. I served in my community, and people have often asked, how do you fit all of that in when life is so busy? I want to touch upon that question a little bit later on, because I think it does apply to each of us if we want to really get the most out of our business. So again, the point as I get to my next point here, the point that I want to emphasize is time passes regardless of how we choose to spend it. But if we want to become an expert, if we want to become a professional, we need to look at how we spend our time and make a few serious and executive decisions to make sure we use it well. It's been said, I think it was, who was it that said it? Malcolm Gladwell, in his book Outliers, suggested that to become a professional, we needed to spend 10,000 hours of involvement or practice in a particular task in order to become professional. However, I remember thinking when I was younger, when I was playing the trombone in jazz bands and what have you, that if I practiced badly, then that time spent wasn't to my favor, was it? We used to say that practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. So if you want to spend 10,000 hours to become expert, we need to make sure that we spend it well. So I'm going to backtrack for just a moment and say, why do you think, and you can maybe share through the chat here, why do you think it would benefit your business and your team to become an expert? I'd like you to actually jump onto the chat here and share some of your reasons as to why, and I'll read them out as they come in. But what is the real benefit of becoming an expert in your business? But what is the real benefit of choosing to not dabble, not to dip your hand in? Statistically speaking, 80% of people in our industry in direct selling, there's 100 million people in our industry, by the way, 80% will spend 10 hours a week or less. Now, you could say 10 hours a week might represent dabbling. It really depends how you spend that time, doesn't it? Some people can spend 30 hours very badly, and someone with 10 can be much more effective. So let's look at some of the answers that are coming in here. We've got Madeline's given a great example. She's saying we want to be professional and become experts because that is the model for duplication. We want others in our teams to become experts and to be professional. That way our organization becomes a professional organization, and then we start to get professional results. So I like that. I think it's definitely the example for duplication, isn't it? Nancy's saying success comes more quickly. It's more fun. There's more money to be earned, and more lives are changed. So we can see the benefits that come back certainly are improved, and we get actually more what we're seeking, don't we, if we put in a more professional effort. Mary Ellen is saying we need to lead by example because the speed of the group is the speed of the leader. That's really true, isn't it? The speed of the group is the speed of the leader. So here's a question you might want to consider, taking Mary Ellen's thought. If everyone in your organization worked their business like you do, would you go backwards or would you go forwards? How would that work? Would you improve? Would your team get more results? Or would you see things start to slide back? Really important way to identify if my personal example is up to scratch. Kimball is saying, because if you want to be a leader, you need credibility. That's really true. I like that point, Kimball. It's a really good point that you share, because in reality, you can have a title. You can have the position of a leader, a diamond, a royal diamond, a manager, a director, a president, for example, and that can give you a degree of authority, but it doesn't necessarily give you the capacity to influence. Influencing others comes down to your credibility, doesn't it? Comes down to who you are, not the position that you hold. So absolutely, if you want to influence and lead your team and have them follow you, then you need to have that credibility that comes from your professional example. Rachel's saying people choose to follow a real leader, and likely they will serve to elevate their commitment. I like that. People do want to follow a leader, and if you're not leading, they're not going to follow. Dave Johnson said again, if it's worth it, it's worth doing it poorly until you learn to do it well. The polish will come in the practice. I love that. So often we're afraid to try for fear of failure. But we've got to all appreciate, and I hope everyone is willing to commit to this moving forward, if you haven't done so already, that becoming professional is a process that happens through practice. The more we practice, the better we get. Again, as a father of 7, when I had my first child, I had zero experience of being a dad. Does that make me unqualified? Maybe in the moment I certainly felt it, but in reality I became a father instantly, but through practice I became a better dad. So I think it's important, isn't it, to recognize that sometimes we just have to jump in. There are some situations in life that require us, in spite of our fear or our lack of experience, to jump in and to start swimming. We do that with parenthood, we do that with our education, and we do that in our business. Sometimes we just need to jump in and start moving, take action, and then improve with practice. Tessa's saying, to share the miraculous results I've seen in my family. That's a good reason to become professional, isn't it? So that you can share the results with those you love, so you can enrich their lives. Michelle saying, better. To be better, we need to be a coach and a mentor, and we can do that when we're experts. So there's a lot coming forward here, lots of good examples. Having a mentor is key. Stay in touch with the people who are where you want to be. I think that's really good. Let me share some couple of thoughts here on the word professional, just to give us context here, and then I'll jump into ways that we can do this. The prefix pro means to lead with, to be forward with. It's if you look at procure, proceed. If you look at that prefix there, it's all about direction. That prefix in the word professional is directional. It means that you are out front, you are leading. That's really important to consider. To profess, of course, is the root of the word professional. To profess, means to take a vow. Originally, a professional was linked back to those in religious fields that would take a public vow of devotion to their faith. That's interesting, isn't it? A public vow, a public promise, a public commitment. That's something worthwhile considering. If we're going to be a professional, are we going to be the one that leads out from the front, that is going to take a public vow of commitment to our business in a way that we're going to really show people by our actions that we're committed? That's really what the word professional, in etymologically speaking, really comes down to the meaning of, to take a public vow to be committed. So here are some reasons I think why it's important that I looked up. One, it makes us competent to deliver meaningful value. So I think that's really important. We could have discussed that already. To be respected by our peers, and that's not just by our social group, but within our business community, in order to have influence like we talked about before, and to have that respect, that comes again through being professional. People have joined in here. Let me just mute all again. 1 second.
That's my oldest man.
I can't find where that button's gone.
He likes daddy, but he's skinnier. His daddy is more buff like the
There we go. Thank you very much. You're muted. The other thing to do, of course, the reason is it makes us qualified to teach others. And in NECAN, it's really important to recognize the role of a mentor, isn't it? We all need one, regardless of our rank or position. We all need someone that we can turn to for advice and help in order to move forwards. If you want to give meaningful advice to your downline, the best advice comes from personal experience. I heard an example once of Gandhi. I'm not sure if this is a true story, but it sure teaches a good point. A mother was very concerned about her son who was consuming too much sugar. And she was very frustrated at the impact that this would have on his well-being, on his health. And she would ask him repeatedly to take the sugar out of his diet. And he wasn't doing it. So on one particular occasion, she decided to take him to Gandhi, thinking that perhaps he might have some influence. She traveled a long distance to come and meet him, set up an appointment, sat down with him and said, please, Gandhi, my son refuses to give up sugar. It's not good for his body. It's not going to treat him well. His health is going to deteriorate. I've asked him, he will not quit eating this sugar. Can you please do something about it? And he said, sure. He spat with the boy and he said, I want you to come back and see me in 2 weeks. That was all his advice. Come back and see me in 2 weeks. And 2 weeks later, they come back. The mother's frustrated. She took this long journey. She turns back 2 weeks later at Gandhi's door. Please, can you talk to my son? Yes, I can. Sit down. He sits down and he says to him, stop eating sugar. And his mum looks at him and says, why couldn't you tell me that 2 weeks ago? And he said, because 2 weeks ago, I was eating sugar. That's interesting, isn't it? It's so important if we want to teach that we teach by example. Of course, the more expert we are as well, the more we can command premium rates. We can get better return for our business dollar as a result. But I want to talk about one critical point, and this really gets us to the meat now of this term professional or expert. Yes, we want to spend 10,000 hours practicing in order to become a professional. I think that's important, but it's important, like I said, to understand how we use that time specifically. It's not just about being involved. It's not just about being present. It's not just about dabbling. And then after 10,000 hours have passed, we can count ourselves professional, because it doesn't work that way, does it? What those 10,000 hours require is what has been termed intentional practice. Intentional practice, for an example, if I was wanting to be a professional golfer, it would mean that I hit golf balls for 2 hours every day with the intention of getting 80% of my shots to fall within 20 feet of the hole. That's specific, that's intentional, isn't it? I'll repeat that again because I'm going to use a networking example next. Intentional practice means, for example, hitting golf balls for 2 hours every day with the intention of getting 80% of your shots to fall within 20 feet of the hole. That's intentional practice. What does intentional practice look like for us in NECAN? Again, I want you to add some comments below to share what you think intentional practice would look like in NECAN. In Orlando last week, we talked about what it meant to be a core consultant. And this is, to me, the very crux of the matter when it comes to being a professional networker. It means we do it deliberately. We work with intent. It means that we're not dabbling. It means that we're working with purpose. But it also means that when we spend our time in our business, we're spending the time deliberately and doing things on purpose. The things that we should be doing on purpose every day to practice is adding new names to our contact list every day. I heard someone once say, and in fact this someone was the CEO of a billion-dollar network marketing company, and he said we should carry our contact list with us everywhere we go, with 2 exceptions. 1, when you're taking a shower, and 2, when you might be swimming, because of course your contact list will get wet. He said aside from that, we should have our contact list with us everywhere we go. If we don't, he said that's the equivalent of putting a sign up on your shop window and saying my shop is closed. We can't afford in our business to close our shop. It should always be open. Why do we have our contact list with us everywhere we go? Because maybe you're having lunch and you have a few minutes spare. During those few minutes, you can pull out your list. You can call someone, you can set an appointment. You can make a contact, you can add someone to your list. But if your list isn't there to add to, what are we doing? I also find that having my contact list with me everywhere I go serves as a visible, tangible reminder that I'm building my business. Now, our contact lists have varied over the years, haven't they? Today, it typically looks like a smartphone. And there are different ways, and we can talk about this in a future webinar, different ways that we can work our smartphone to build an effective, structured, prioritized contact list. But it's important that we have our contact list with us where we go. I've got a couple of things coming up here. Make 5 calls a day with the intention of attracting a certain profile of a business partner. Daily methods of operation on purpose is what Michelle's saying. Dave, he always seems to have great quotes, don't you, Dave? You can borrow other people's systems and scripts and plans and make them your own and then loan them out to others. Some of my best thinking has been done by others. Dave is just a wealth of knowledge, isn't he? Some of my best thinking has been done by others. That's the great thing, isn't it, about today? We can find what others have done well, copy it. That's absolutely fine to do. So again, here are my thoughts about deliberate, intentional practice to help us become professional. Carry our contact list with us everywhere we go. Be sure to add to it every day. The second thing is, on a consistent basis, extend invitations to people to hear a business opportunity presentation or to introduce them to a product. Now, I was speaking with my English team last night, and one of the things that we highlighted on our call was there is a space between adding someone to your list and extending an invitation for them to hear a presentation. There is a bridge between those two steps, and that bridge is relationship. Just because you've added someone to your list doesn't mean that you are immediately, or they are immediately ready to hear a presentation. We need to build the rapport, build the relationship first, so that when the time comes and the time is right, the invitation can be extended. The third thing that I think is really important is to consistently participate in ABCs. That is so important. That is, of course, where the benefit of the invitation comes in, is that we need to recognize that the power of that third-party validation. The benefit of this, again, it's hugely duplicatable. I'm going to repeat those three things because we've covered a lot today. If we want to deliberately, intentionally become a professional, what do I practice every day? 1, carrying my contact list with me everywhere I go. Make sure that I add to it daily. 2, consistently extend invitations to people on my list to hear a presentation about the product or about the business opportunity. We do that consistently. The third thing, we participate in ABCs where the presentation can be delivered with the help of an expert other person. I promise you, ladies and gentlemen, as we spend our time doing those three things, all the other things will follow. We won't get people to meetings. If you're a launch partner and you wanted to have a meeting on a monthly basis, you won't get people to meetings. You won't get your seats filled if you're not doing those first 3 steps that I talked about. If you're wanting to rank advanced to gold or to platinum or to diamond, that's not going to happen if you're not doing those 3 things. It's not going to happen if you're not teaching your team to do those 3 things. You might be great at giving a presentation. You might be fantastic on stage. You might be wonderful in sharing testimonials about the product. But if we're not adding people to our list, if we're not extending invitations, if we're not participating in ABCs, nothing else really matters, because everything else follows on from there. We could have a list of 10 things that we should do in order to become professionals, but it really comes down to those 3 critical things. And like I said, it's about practicing. Sometimes I've found, as I speak to people, and I'm sure each of you have experienced the same with your teams, or perhaps you've observed it in your own self. Many people I've found in NECAM are very comfortable talking about the product. They can share the product testimonials. They can talk to people about the product with confidence and with enthusiasm because they've had a positive experience with the product and they're very anxious to share. But a lot of people lack confidence in talking about the business opportunity. One of the reasons for this is because they feel that they don't have the credibility or authority that they feel they should have in order to do it with conviction. It's important to appreciate that whether you're new or old in the business, we can have great conviction in talking about the business. You can, and that's where the power of the ABC comes in. If you're a little bit hesitant, get someone else in that has more confidence. Dennis Williams and Ruth Williams are saying baseball players get paid based on how good they are at the fundamentals, hitting, catching, and throwing. We get paid on how good we are at the fundamentals of contacting, presentation, and duplication. I think that's really important. I want to conclude on that point, ladies and gentlemen, that to be a professional means to be leading from the front. Again, the prefix pro is directional in its definition. To be a professional, we profess, we publicly proclaim a commitment to our cause. To be a professional means that we practice with intent and with a particular purpose repeatedly for at least 10,000 hours. This means that we do those 3 things repeatedly until we become masters. Adding names to our contact list, inviting people to hear presentations, and participating in ABCs. If we do that for 10,000 hours, what would your business look like if each hour was involving reflection, evaluation, repractice in order to get perfect? That would be incredible. Would that change your business if you spent 10,000 hours deliberately practicing those 3 critical behaviors? I think anyone that did that would very confidently rest assured that they could become a diamond or a royal diamond in this business. But if we're not doing those three things, we need to ask ourselves, am I acting professionally? So here's my final thought and my final question for today. If everyone in your business acted the way you do in your business, would your business move forwards or backwards? Are you practicing with intent to become professional in those fundamental behaviors that will add value to your business and help you to become credible, genuine leaders, and have authority in what you do, and of course, the results to match? I hope so. If you're not doing that yet, then I invite you today to make that commitment to invest meaningfully in those three critical behaviors on a daily basis. Practice, practice, practice. Gretel has just said, I would love to do this, but I don't know what stops me. I have to make up my mind. That's interesting. I think that might be a subject for next week. Let's make that the subject of next week's webinar. What if I want to do it, but I don't feel overly committed? That's one of the most important questions we can ask. So next week, Gretel, you've given us our subject for next week's webinar, how to make a serious commitment and make a decision. That's next week's lesson. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you wonderfully for being here tonight, and we will speak to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks.